Shanghai. With its 23 million inhabitants, it is by far the most populated city in China. It is also one of the vastest in the world. Hyperactive and multicultural, this vibrant hub has undergone a stunning expansion in recent decades.
This whole area that you see over here used to be empty land. So all the buildings that you see over here are brand new. And this is a city that's really literally built from scratch.
Over time, Shanghai has had many identities. From major seaport to industrial epicenter, it has always been driven by one objective: commerce.
Most of the time, I don't go out in big supermarkets or shopping malls, just have everything being delivered on spot. Whatever you can imagine they have. You want to repair your bike, they will repair it for you. You want to repair the car, they can also do that for you on the street.
More than 50 years after the end of the foreign concessions, Shanghai is once again becoming a leading international city.
1/4 of all the foreign direct investment in China comes to Shanghai. All the major head office of the international corporation are located here.
In a way, Shanghai is its own free nation in the middle of a vast communist country. This makes it a unique place with a complex character. Since Shanghai occupies both banks of the Huangpu River, close to the mouth of the Yangtze, its evolution has been fundamentally linked to water. From fishing village to the world's largest industrial port, this commerce-driven city has always found ways to reinvent itself.
Shanghai was, let's say 150 years ago, was still a small fisherman's place. And the interesting thing is that places that surround Shanghai, Suzhou, Hangzhou, were much more important, historically speaking, than Shanghai itself. But because China lost the Opium Wars and had to sign the Treaty of Nanjing, it was forced to open its cities to foreign powers and make the city into a trade hub. Development then went into two waves. So the first wave was, let's say, end of the 19th and the beginning of the 20th century, where Shanghai really transformed from this small fisherman's village into a world city, really into one of the most important cities in the world. Then after 49, when the People's Republic of China was established, basically this whole growth came to a slowdown, came to a stop. And basically Shanghai was punished for being the so Western-oriented city that it became. And until the early 80s, nothing really happened in Shanghai. So for more than 30 years, growth completely stopped in this city. And only after the opening up policies of Deng Xiaoping in 1978, the city was able to re-establish itself.
And this astonishing development profits who?
First of all, it profits the government, because if you can show to the outside world that you're able to pull this off, then you are able to establish yourself or to position yourself as quite a modern country, of course. And that is one of the big agendas behind this thing, to show the outside world we are a big country, we are a great nation, and we're able to do this. That's one. The second, I think, is that a lot of real estate companies have been profiting from it. 20 years ago, there was not such a thing as a real estate industry in this country. So that's been really established right now. So both in, let's say, the physical way and in the financial way, they have been profiting from it.
How is the city divided today?
Well, the division is basically very clear when you look from this point of view. On this side, we have Puxi, the western side of the river, and this is Pudong, which literally means the east side of the river. Puxi is where the old town lies, where the city historically has been developed over time. And after Shanghai was appointed to be the economic heart of China, the government decided to develop Pudong into a economic development zone. So Lujiazui, the tip that we see over there, was appointed to be the heart of this economic zone. And basically this whole area that you see over here used to be empty land. So all the buildings that you see over here are brand new. And this is a city that's really literally built from scratch.
Do you know how many skyscrapers are built every year?
Well, what they say about China is that China is building a Chicago every year in terms of skyscrapers. So that is sort of the one-liner I can give you.
That is quite impressive.
Yeah. This divide between an old city and a new city that is so harsh is, well, there's a few cities that have that, I think. But what's also interesting is that you see here the very icon of the colonials taking over the city of Shanghai in the 20s and the 30s, the Bund, which has been redeveloped in the early 2000s. And we see the skyline of Lujiazui, the modernization project of the Chinese government here in Shanghai. And the irony is, of course, that people who appreciate this new project are with their backs towards the Bund looking at that new area. So in that sense, it's really a move from the old century to the new one, or from the old area to the new one. Yeah.
What changed with the 2010 World Expo?
Yeah, well, China used a couple of mega events like the Olympics, like the 2010 Expo, to develop their city. So they really use this as a reason to develop their infrastructure, to develop their, to reposition themselves. So until 25 years ago, there was no connections between Puxi and Pudong. Right now we have, I believe, 7 or 9 even. And all these bridges and tunnels have been built in a period of 10, 15 years. And some of these bridges are pretty spectacular, especially because they have to be high to have like the big ships be able to pass, right? So you see that they have to be able to bring the cars down. It's really a spectacular thing, especially at night. You see the car spiraling down like 3 levels or something like this. So we have, I think, 4 or 5 bridges in a row, and then we also have like 3 or 4 tunnels. And the bizarre thing is actually that government officials prefer bridges over tunnels, apparently, because bridges are very visual. There is this thing in China. Of course, we have another political system here than in the West, yeah? But still, government officials are very much controlled by their performance, not so much by the public as well as by their people in Beijing. So every now and then, people from Beijing will come down to other cities to check upon the work that's being done. And of course, to show a bridge to your boss is a very good thing.
What did it change in the planning of the city?
Well, I think the most influential change was that the urban infrastructure was really improved. So we went from 5 to 23 subway lines in 3 years because of the Expo. There used to be factories here and factory workers that lived here, and these people have been all replaced. I think it's something like 20,000 or 50,000 people or so. Part of it is also this. So this is the other side of the Expo. So it all started with the chimney over there. It's an old electricity station, which is now turned into an art museum. And then all this area was all Expo. So it was gigantic. Of course, the China pavilion, the red one we see at the back, and then the Saudi Arabia pavilion is still standing. And there's some of the bigger buildings, like the big one here, and this event space that is now turned into a sort of arena.
Oh, there you go. I'm as tall as you are, almost. Would that be the symbol of the new Shanghai?
Well, I think that the true symbol we just saw with the skyline of Lujiazui. That's really where they're building the second tallest tower in the world, where there's really the concentration of the economic forces. But of course, with a city of 23 million, the notion that there's only one center is a bit backwards. So we have several centers, we have several commercial zones that are a concentration of power and money, basically. As a sort of summit, I would say, these buildings that you see over there that have a square meter price that's higher than living next to Central Park in New York. Some of them were empty for years. So right now these buildings are filling up, but there have been apartment buildings that have been vacant for several periods.
Apparently, if you leave Shanghai for 2 weeks and come back, the city changed.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So just before the expo, that change was really strongly. Like your favorite restaurant would disappear overnight, or people would basically put a new road through a residential block. Like I literally was once in a taxi arriving at a crossing, and there was a new road, and we never saw it before. Neither me nor the taxi driver. So we were both surprised about the fact that the city really took another shape. These kind of things still happen, but not at the pace is slower than before.
The stunning pace of urban development has slowed down, but Shanghai's growth is far from over. Local economy is booming, backed by the construction of a massive new port and a free trade zone, a groundbreaking move for communist China.
In the early 90s, Shanghai became quite important in terms of economics because the central government decided to reopen its economy, and Shanghai was one of the main part of this plan. They decided to build an entire new port, a seaport, 32 kilometers away from the shore. They construct an island of 4 square kilometers, and it's linked with the continent with a bridge of 32 kilometers. This port is quite amazing because there you can find all the products that you're using at your home probably have been transited by this port. Last year, in 2012, they exchanged more than 32 million containers plus 700 million of tons of goods. So it's by far the biggest and the busiest port around the world. It's the only port in China which is a bonded area. So there is no tax regarding all the goods that you import into China. So it makes a really special place to import and exchange some goods.
As a clear indicator of changes within the rest of the country, the port of Shanghai has had many lives, reflecting China's evolution over time.
This is the new policy that Shanghai will probably be the lead, and then they're going to replicate this free trade zone to many other cities in China. But from now, Shanghai remain the first place to do it, and it will, of course, make Shanghai more and more open in terms of finance and international trade. The 5-year plans that the central government put in place in 2011, one of the objectives of that plan is to make China a more consumer good economy. So the people, the middle income people could buy more and more quality products and affordable products. And a part of that plan is to make Shanghai the central region and area to attract investment and to make sure that the service economy can develop. One quarter of all the foreign direct investment in China comes to Shanghai. So it's really important. All the major head office of the international corporation are located here in Shanghai. There is also a lot of state-owned enterprises as well here located in Shanghai. So it attracts this collaboration with the rest of the world. And all the banking system, the financial system is really well developed in Pudong, Lujiazui. So Shanghai remains a really important place in terms of finance. With all the new policy that have been put in place by the central government, with this the new port becoming quite important for its economy, the financial sector was going to boom quite rapidly. Shanghai is retaking that place in the world.
Commerce is no less than the soul of Shanghai. Between the impressive high-rises of the financial district and the crowded streets of the popular neighborhoods, business here is clearly bustling.
You could just open very quickly a small shop selling out things in 2 meter square space, and that's actually something very appreciated. So for instance, in my place, most of the time I don't go out in big supermarkets or shopping malls, just have everything being delivered on spot. Yesterday there was a guy shouting, I sell fruits, so I just went out and I bought fruits.
About the different types of street businesses, you have all sorts of different people selling different things?
Yeah, actually, whatever you can imagine they have. You want to repair your bike, they will repair it for you. You want to repair the car, they can also do that for you on the street. You have children, they can sell for you balloons, so all kind of stuff.
Isn't it contradictory, though, with the new Shanghai and the new big stores?
It is not actually. That makes really the charm of this city. You can find all the brands we are used to in Europe or in America, and you would probably pay the same price for that. But at the same time, if you want to live like a local, you can do that and pay much cheaper and have unexpected services. So that's actually a very luxury kind of life, because actually I think the offer is larger.
And are the little street commerces threatened, you think?
I don't think they are. I think actually more and more people coming in town will require more and more service, and they will also propose more and more activities.
How much does it cost, though?
Well, actually, it's quite cheap here. If you want to buy food, it's probably 1/10 of what you would pay for that in Europe. Of course, you have every kind of prices here in town, but people will normally eat on very cheap amount of money. Some of the people will come later or after, just collecting other stuff. So this wood actually could be used for many things. Probably 2 streets from here, you will have people building furniture, will be able to sell chairs, make tables for you. But then also they will sell this for the weight to some more heavy industries.
There's a lot of recycling. Nothing is lost.
No, you can say that. Nothing is lost.
The daily consumption here is between the stores that have a fixed address and the street businesses.
Yeah, that actually, those two kind of business, they will coexist with no problem. You can either buy from a local shop, probably people be settled in town for quite a while. I mean, the stores selling fruits, or the restaurant, the small restaurant. And then you have all these moving carts around. They are more probably people coming from outside. Could be fresh migrants or just people living in the suburbs, just going to make business in town. Chinese people have always done that in the past. It's been for 4,500 years here in Shanghai that you have people selling all this stuff. And we are in the country of commerce, so that's definitely something honorable to do that.
% of what we buy around the world is made in China. Let's see what the Chinese people buy themselves.
Shanghai basically is a bit different from other cities, since the local farmers around this region used to sell their goods in the past here. So it's always been a city of trade and commerce. So when the Westerners came in town, they found already some people willing to trade with them. And it has always been developing since. So what we see nowadays is only the expansion of this sense of service, sense of commerce. The history of China is quite a troubled one, with wars, with many invasions, so people had to go through many difficulties in the past. But then again, people would always adapt and find a way either to make a living or to find a way to fix things that they had because there was no way to buy new. So that's basically in the culture. It was not possible in the past to repair your computer from the street, but now you can do that. Yeah, you have streets full of electronics. So that's a kind of new business they have created that was not existing in the past.
So it's recycling heaven here.
Yeah, definitely. Most of Chinese people will not willingly throw away things. So if they want to buy things also, they will go on the second-hand market and find if they can find cheap things to buy. Most of the time they always compare prices too. So price is something very important.
Do the people actually buy new things in the stores?
They do, but they are very price conscious. So there's really a second-hand market and a second market on the street where people will be able to see things, touch things, and probably buy exactly what they need.
Shanghai's dynamic business culture has always attracted people from everywhere. And the city's prosperity illustrates its success. Those who have passed through have left a mark on the cultural and architectural footprint, creating a city that stands out from the rest of the country.
The British brought lots of words with them from India to China, and Bund is a Hindi word. It means the embankment of a river. So the area where the British first set up their residences and their warehouses and the piers for their ships is called the Bund. The Bund is one of the postcards, as you say, of Shanghai. But actually, there are many different styles and many different eras of Shanghai's history represented on the Bund.
So you can actually see the evolution of Shanghai on this strip here.
Yes, and every one of these buildings tells a story. Shanghai has been in the middle of a huge urban renovation program for the last 20 years. And so it's very common for areas of Shanghai to be demolished and replaced by high-rises. But it's very unusual for something like that to happen on the Bund. Most of these buildings are protected. Shanghai has always been about being the most modern, the fastest, the tallest. And therefore, when these buildings were built, they were the state of the art. But after the revolution, Shanghai was basically starved of investment funds, and very little was torn down here, and very little was built between about 1950 and 1990. But then Shanghai got the green light to start investing again. And what did you get? Well, you got the fastest and the tallest and the most modern, just like the old days. So it's part of the Shanghai character. But the 1920s and 30s are perhaps its most famous, Shanghai's most famous time, because there was a lot of economic activity, a lot of money sloshing around, and therefore a lot of building and a lot of artistic energy in the city. Just in the first couple of buildings, we have British, American, French, Japanese, German, and even Middle Eastern. These are some of the most iconic buildings on the Bund. The former Bank of China, actually it's still being used as the Bank of China, but different management. It's the only Bund building that incorporates Chinese elements in its design. You can see the top has got a Chinese-style roof, and those pierced openings on the front are reminiscent of lattice work in traditional Chinese architecture.
Is there a lot of money now invested in this preservation?
Well, the city invests a lot of money in infrastructure and new construction, but it also has a budget for preservation. And there are Shanghainese who are very much concerned with historic preservation and do their part to try to increase the number of buildings that survive.
For the people of Shanghai, is this their Shanghai?
Well, Shanghai is a very big place,
Right.
and not everybody lives in the historic core of the cities. In fact, most people live in high-rise buildings in the ring roads surrounding the city. So this is not everyone's identity for Shanghai, but it's certainly for the majority of the people one of the things that makes Shanghai Shanghai. In the 1920s and 30s, when the West was going through the Great Depression, the Chinese economy, especially that in the coastal trading cities, trading ports, was booming. And so there was a great deal of interest in investment in China and trade with China during the 20s and 30s. Not too dissimilar to the interest that many Western countries have in trade with China today. Remember, Shanghai is a city of immigrants, basically. People came from all over the world and all over China to make it here in the big city. So it's like New York or even Paris or other great capitals around the world. It's a cosmopolitan city. That's the best word to describe Shanghai. Cosmopolitan.
Cosmopolitan.
Yeah. The population of Shanghai in 1950 was about 5 million people. By 1960, it was 10 million already. So now we're up to, they say, 23 million. Yeah, it's more of the same. But this building was built for what amounts to the very first Chinese state-owned enterprise in the late 1800s. But the stone building behind it, which is no longer on the list of Bund buildings, is actually much, much older, built in the 1850s. The whole block was previously owned by the largest American trading company called Russell and Company. We'll go in and take a look. It hasn't seen much tender, loving care in the last 150 years. Careful, these stairs are from the 1850s. We're walking on the same stairs that the employees of Russell and Company did when they were trading here back in the middle of the 19th century. Every family has its own gas, water, and electric meter. So these represent one family each. You can count this many, and then these, and then this wall as well. Okay. So that's how many families now live in this building, which is 160 years old. There's fewer and fewer families living in conditions like this in Shanghai, but there still are some.
Right, but the Bund isn't a residential area.
Well, until the turn of the last century, until about 1900, the entire city was only 10 blocks deep. So everyone lived and worked within 10 blocks of the river. So it depends on which decade you're talking about. Mm-hmm. This has been residential. There have been people living here for the entire period of the post-Opium War period. This is the kitchen that's shared by 5 families in this part of the house. And each family has its own gas burner, and each family has its own light bulb, so that if I'm cooking, I'm not running up your electric bill. And if you look up, you can see the original molding. So this was once the Russell and Company's offices and apartments.
And would the city do something with this building?
Well, I would imagine that in good time, whenever there's money to relocate all these people and do something with this building, yes, it will be renovated. Of course, it's always more expensive to do a historically correct renovation than it is to just tear everything out and build new. So yeah, we have to keep our fingers crossed that when they do get around to renovating this building, that they'll try to preserve some of what's left.
Shanghai was completely closed to foreigners during the decades following the arrival of the Communist Party in 1949. But globalization has forced China to reopen its doors. Today's Shanghai is very different from what it was during the foreign concessions of the 19th century.
In the 1930s, Shanghai was the biggest city in Asia. It was probably the biggest city for foreign presence as well. Well, you used to have three parts. The city started on the Bund area, so on the river, and this is where first the British settled. And they made from that what was called the international settlement, which is the reunion of the British settlement and the American settlement. And a little bit further down the river came the French a few years later, and they never wanted to mix up with the British and the American, so they kept a separate French concession with a French administration. And all around that, because these concessions were small, they got bigger and bigger with time, but they were still a small part of the city. All around that, you have what was called the Chinese city with different districts. And they were different legal entities.
So they didn't work and lived and were under the same rules as the Chinese people in Shanghai?
Well, the foreigners in general were not under the same rules because in the treaties, there was what was called extraterritoriality. So basically, if you were a Frenchman and you committed a crime in Shanghai, you would be judged by the French consul and under French law, which was very practical if you had committed a crime. Of course, this was never extended to Chinese people.
What are the different impacts of the foreigners here in Shanghai?
Well, the first one is Shanghainese people still today are very they like foreigners a lot, and they like foreign ways a lot, and they're very attracted by the foreign way of life. And this makes them quite different from the other Chinese. So Shanghai has a very foreign-oriented spirit. At the same time, because they were so foreign-oriented, they were also attracting innovation, technology innovation from the foreigners. For example, in the early times, this is where cars started, this is where electricity started, gas, and so on. And still today, a lot of the brands, a lot of the foreign product, when they start their launch, they start here. And then they expand to the rest of the country.
There's a special story with the sycamore trees in Shanghai.
Yeah, the sycamore tree, I mean, the original tree was probably brought to France way before foreigners were coming here en masse. But when you had the concession time, the French brought back the sycamore to do just like they had in France, which is line it again the street to give shadows during the summertime. And what happened is that the other foreigners and then the Chinese started to find that it was a really good idea to use them for shadowing. So they started to plant them in other parts of the city. And it is really now the symbol of Shanghai. And if you want to make a place a little bit more like upmarket and higher scale, then basically people do plant sycamore trees in new places where there was never in the previous time. It really kind of created the atmosphere in Shanghai. In the beginning, you had every kind of business trying to grab the Chinese opportunity. Nowadays, it's a bit different because particularly when you talk about Shanghai, this is closer to a developed country than to a developing one. And the big opportunities are not so much in Shanghai anymore. They are in what is called the second tier, third tier, fourth tier cities, where the need for development, the need for new products, the need for new ideas, and so on and so forth is still there.
The foreigners today, do they have their quarters? Do they have their neighborhoods? Or you find them throughout the city?
I think you find foreigners everywhere in the city now. If you're young and you work a lot and party a lot, you will live downtown in a small space and because it's very close to everything. And if you have a bit older and if you have family, then you'll probably live in the suburb because you will have more space, a cleaner environment, and foreign schools around.
How do they interact, the foreigners in Shanghai, with the Shanghainese?
Well, today there is a lot of interaction. Basically, it's really a question of age for the Chinese. Because if you're over 40 or 45, then the chances that you actually speak foreign language is not very high because the education system didn't really allow it. But if you speak to people who have been to university and are in their 30s or even younger than that, then they will probably speak English. And a lot of them will have studied abroad. There are more and more. I mean, it's still a minority in China, but particularly in Shanghai, you will find a lot of people who have studied abroad and have come back. And whether they come from Shanghai or from some other places, if they come back from abroad, there is a high chance that you find them in Shanghai, in Beijing, or in Shenzhen, in the really developed places.
And the cost of living here for a professional, for someone who comes here and works for a Chinese company, let's say?
It's very difficult to say because it varies a lot of your lifestyle. Okay.
You can live on very little, I'm sure.
You can still live on very little if you live away from the center and you just take and use and eat things that are very local. Mm-hmm. But as soon as you want foreign things, then it becomes more expensive because, of course, everything has to be imported. So Shanghai is becoming one of the expensive cities of the world. You can still live on a reasonable budget if you know your ways, but it's getting more and more difficult. And it's very clear that within a few years, or maybe a decade, then it will become one of the most expensive cities in the world.
Countless foreign businesses are now participating in Shanghai's economic revival, hoping to secure a place in this international hotspot. And most of these ventures are composed of multicultural teams.
They're very hardworking and they're curious. They want to learn. The people here have chosen to come to work with an international firm because they've asked themselves, do I really want to work in a place where it's 100% Chinese? Or do I want to open up to the world? So we have young people who speak English, some who have even studied abroad, and who want to work with international businesses. They want to find out about the world and work with expats.
Est-ce que vos employés chinois ont beaucoup de revendications? Est-ce qu'ils demandent des choses particulières qui vous ont étonné?
The one thing here that surprised me at first was the desire to improve their skills, to move forward and to know what will happen on the short term. What's my next step? Can I get a promotion? What's my next challenge? And at the same time, they're concerned with the long term and with what they'll be in the future. I think this is a typical Chinese thing, managing the very long term while being very diverse in the short term by trying out many different things. There aren't many failures here. I mean, if there are setbacks, like starting a company that doesn't work out, you just pick yourself up, start over, and try something else. No one judges you if you've done something that failed and you've started up something else. So things are very stimulating. People here are very optimistic. New projects and businesses blossom day after day. There's a lively startup business community in Shanghai, and it's really interesting.
Est-ce que tu sens que la ville s'est internationalisée?
I have friends who have been here for over 15 years, and they tell me that everything has completely changed. Back then, there were very few French people, very few outsiders in general. Things didn't work like this. So to them, it's a complete revolution. I've been here 3 years, and I see more and more young workers and students.
Mais en même temps, maintenant, Shanghai, c'est plus comme avant. Il y a peut-être moins de chocs culturels qu'à une certaine époque, sûrement.
This is a cross between New York and popular China, so you don't really feel the clash. What's different is the general culture, the people, the business relationships with clients. And there's the obvious language issue. This language barrier, even if we all speak English, goes much deeper than just language. It's also a cultural divide, a way of seeing things that's different. Here, the workday isn't only about work. It's also a social life. So having lunch with your staff, going to a karaoke bar, or even going to dinner are all part of work. I once went to northern China to present the company and our staff, as well as to talk about our work, our experience, our case studies. When we finished our presentation, they asked us a few general questions about New Run, and the last 15 minutes were questions about me. I had never seen such a thing. Why is a woman at the head of New Run? How did you get here? Why did you come to China? What did you study in business school? Where did you study? So I said, in Paris and in the US. And they said, really? Where in the US? Do you have any kids? Have you visited other parts of China? It's a real tradition here. In order to do business with people, you need to know them. Everything starts with personal questions, then moves on to dinners like this.
This is your place, your restaurant?
This is. Welcome to Scarpetta.
Thank you. So you know Florence a bit.
Very well. Very well.
Are you born and raised Shanghainese?
I'm actually from Taipei, and I was born in the US, but I moved out here about 10 years ago. So I was looking for and very hungry for new opportunities, so just came out here and tried it out.
Do you feel that it's the place to be right now?
Absolutely. It was the place to be 10 years ago, and even more so now. It's much more livable. Shanghai is definitely still very much so communist with its capitalist take and much more willing to start adapting new ideas. Shanghai's already changed so much. I think the rest of China is going to catch up very soon, the major tier 2 cities. I think Shanghai is sort of the melting pot of China. You really have the most expatriates here, more so than Beijing, more so than Chengdu for sure. And as a financial center, that makes total sense. But it's all about how do I make more money? You know, what am I going to buy? Where's my Lamborghini?
I mean, that wasn't the case 10 years ago.
No, not at all. It's definitely changed the last, I'd say, 5 years. And very evident by even the entertainment scene, right? So where expendable income comes to play is, I remember the first time about 5 years ago, I heard about someone buying 100 bottles of champagne at one table at a club. Who does that? Not even in Las Vegas, right? So it's an interesting city.
Are there a lot of people like you who studied abroad and came back here to work?
There are actually a lot of returnees now. So whether it was the US or Australia, even I'm seeing a lot of like French Chinese now.
Well, French, there's a lot of French Chinese. Or Canadian, also from Vancouver?
Absolutely, a lot from Vancouver. So there are definitely a lot of returnees now. And I think it's they spend a little time, they learn something from abroad and decided that they could do something different for their own country, so they came back. And it was sort of the same philosophy I had, which was, I think I have competitive advantage because I'm bilingual. Spent some time outside, saw some other ideas, and I can bring that to a market that doesn't have those ideas either. Similar to Scarpetta.
Is there a problem with the hygiene and the food on the street and this, you know, the security?
Yes.
In all honesty.
Absolutely. Definitely reused oil, repackaged products, fake labels. I mean, the Chinese government tries very hard to have a lot of rules and regulations about having packaging on it, tells where is it sourced, etc. Unfortunately, people just rip them off and put new labels on. And it's even worse on the streets. At least for restaurants like us, we're able to talk to certain reliable sources like Gusto's. And these people, I trust the actual owners that put their hearts into making sure it's real product.
Are you feeling the new Shanghai as we speak in your restaurant?
Absolutely. I mean, obviously there was a period of education, but now with just the pure amount of money here, people are interested in trying out new things. Obviously, they started off with all the branded products, and then thereafter now they're wondering, well, outside of the branded products, what else is there? And there's lots of famous sommeliers that are here now. All the big, obviously, alcohol brands are here. LVMH, etc., is making a huge push. People are hungry for knowledge. I think they have the expendable income, and they want to trade that for, a new lifestyle.
Every day and on every level, Shanghai is moving forward. Its population is undergoing profound changes. The hopes of the younger generations have nothing in common with what their ancestors sought. If the face of the city has been completely redefined over the course of a short decade, one can only begin to imagine what the place will become 20 years from now.